Right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to everybody who's attending in person and online. As you'll be well aware, this event is taking place nationally throughout 3 of our centres. It's a pleasure to see you all in person, and also to all of those tuning online. I can see we've got 130 people online at the moment, so it's a pleasure to see you all and welcome you all to this 3PB Pupillage Open Evening. My name is Jack Felvus. I'm a barrister practicing at 3PB. I specialise in property and education work, and my colleague sat beside me is Mr. Beatson.
Yeah, I'm also a barrister doing family, specifically children, and we both joined fairly recently, didn't we? I tenant here from September 23, and Jack, you were?
Yes, tenant from September 24, so we were in a very short succession. The purposes of tonight is effectively to take you through what we are offering at 3PB, the advantages of our training programme, and also to take any questions from all of you, which is, of course, the most important thing of this evening. Likewise, for those online, if you have any questions, just pop them into the chat function or the Q&A function, and we'll come to you or address as many as we can.
We've also had some questions submitted in advance, and we'll try and deal with as many of those as we can as well.
Right, so I'm going to start off by just giving an outline about 3PB and what pupillages we are offering in the 2027 recruitment round. 3PB's pupillage is non-competitive with your peers, and so we are recruiting for 4 pupillages in 2027. As you all know, we are a multidisciplinary set spread across a number of centres across the country, including Bristol, Birmingham, Oxford, Winchester, London, Manchester and Bournemouth. 4 pupillages that we are offering to start in October 2027 are as follows. London is education and public law focused, Bristol is family, Oxford is property and Winchester is crime. So the important thing to say there is that's the 2027 recruitment. In 2028, that will be very well different, dependent upon the need of chambers. Insofar as the benefits are concerned, starting off with the financial remuneration, the pupillage award for 2027 is £60,000. That's split between £30,000 grant in the first 6 and a £30,000 guaranteed earnings in the second 6. Perhaps differently to some other chambers, however, you get paid your second 6 money in advance. So you get the same amount of money each month throughout the 12 months of your pupillage, and so you're not waiting for your billings to come in following your cases in second 6. We also have a wide range of other benefits, including private health insurance for pupils, access to Westlaw, Practical Law, Lexis, the usual online resources, as well as IT support and the like. If you haven't yet looked at our website, I would encourage you to do so. There's lots of information on there in respect of pupillage, 3pb.co.uk/pupillage. There's a number of videos on there from barristers explaining their time at 3PB. And of course, for those of you attending in person, there's some literature to take home. And of course, you have the opportunity to ask us questions tonight. What I would say before handing over to David is that once you are selected for pupillage, you'll find that you are very well supported by both your supervisors and the staff here. It's a very friendly set of chambers who are all here to help you succeed in obtaining tenancy if you're successful in pupillage. I know that David is now going to speak to you about how we recruit pupils and a bit more about our application process and the competencies in which we look for.
Yes, so some of you may know a bit about this already if you've done things such as mini pupillages with 3PB. In terms of mini pupillages, it's always quite a hot topic, I think, and people are always quite keen to know a lot about them. Across the 7 offices that Jack's outlined, generally 3PB do around 45 to 50 mini pupillages every year, and it's something that I know every set of chambers strongly encourages. It's a really good way of seeing what life is like in different areas, which is extremely important, particularly as Jack's outlined that in 2027 there are practice area specific pupillages being offered. And so, for example, in Bristol 2027 it's going to be family. if that's what you're interested in, really good idea to do a mini pupillage in family, because it may well be that you shadow, you see what happens in course, and you think it's absolutely not for you. And same with other areas. It's a really good way of seeing that. You can, as I've said, shadow in court, observing in conferences, speaking to the clerks, seeing how things run, shadowing other barristers, and even doing things such as getting some drafting done and that type of thing. It's a really good experience. In terms of the mini pupillages themselves, I think it is quite specific in terms of centre to centre, in terms of the different ones that they offer. So again, Jack's given you the details of the website, because that will update very regularly in terms of the availability for different mini pupillages. In terms of recruitment for pupillage itself, that is, as I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, will be well aware of, through the Pupillage Gateway. The 3PB recruitment process is designed to be, and I'm sure Jack, who's been through it, I was slightly different, we'll come on to that later, but I'm sure you'd say it's designed to be very fair, very transparent, and that's certainly the aspirations for the process. In terms of consideration, 3PB doesn't consider your A-levels, results in A-levels. It's more about competencies and qualities specific to the candidates. All applications are anonymised when they go through, so any identifiable details, including names and educational backgrounds, are removed. On the Gateway system, the advert is live, so we do encourage you to go and check that out and have a look. In terms of the applications, they're independently reviewed by 2 assessors. Interviews are conducted and structured in an open format, which the idea is to allow all candidates to really give them the opportunity to flourish and excel in those. The first round interviews for the 2027 pupillage, I think, aiming to be, they'll be remotely via Teams. The aim is for that to be around March 26. Then second round interviews held in person in April 2026, which will be at our London centre, and 3PB gives assistance to candidates for their travel costs. In terms of there's the standardised Bar Council questionnaire, but candidates are always asked to respond to 7 specific questions, which are unique to 3PB. It's about your relevant experiences or skills, why you want to join 3PB in particular, which is an important one, choosing a judgment from the last 12 months and commenting on it, a mistake that you yourself have made, and an obstacle that you've had to overcome, and the learning from that, and an occasion where you think that your personal advocacy has made a difference, and why. In terms of what 3PB look for in the applications, it's looking for an overall strong evidence of clearly your intellectual ability, and that's not just limited to your academia. It can be achievements outside of university, good judgment in terms of your decision making, your ability to build rapport with other people, which is an extremely important quality when you're in chambers, your personal drive and determination, a commitment to the bar as a profession, but also to 3PB specifically, and an understanding of what being a barrister means in practice. Also an experience of public speaking, whether that's mooting, debating, or there are several ways in which that can be demonstrated. With the applications themselves, I think everyone in the 3PB would say vague, generic answers don't help. It's about evidence-backed answers, real-life experiences, that type of thing that will stand out. Because as you can imagine, the volume of applications come in, and the people reading them, they see a large volume. It's about seeing something that stands out and that we're able to sort of really put a bit more of a personality on what we're reading. By looking at the websites, in terms of the people that have achieved tenancy sort of over the last 5-7 years, you can see that there's a high quality and also diversity in terms of the pupils that we've had, and people that have gone to obtain tenancy. I think the last thing that as a chambers we'd say is be selective in terms of what chambers you apply to. I know the temptation, particularly at the stage that you're at, is just to scattergun approach, apply to absolutely everything. That can come across in your applications from time to time. So do be specific to the chambers and do research into that chambers. Know why you're applying to that chambers specifically. And good luck with the process.
Thank you, David. What I want to talk about before we move on to questions is what training we have on offer in respect of once you're in. So you've gone through the SIFT, you've gone through the 2 interviews, you've got pupillage due to start at the centre, and what is it you're going to be doing during the first 6, and what additional training you're going to be receiving during your pupillage. Of course, you have your written work throughout the first 6, and there is a number of checklists in which you have to complete in respect of your specific practice area. And that makes sure that you have experienced and been marked and assessed on various pieces of paperwork to ensure that your standard of paperwork is at a sufficient level before you move into second 6. On the oral advocacy side of things, there is an advocacy training programme internally within Chambers, and we're very proud of that advocacy training programme. That will involve several different exercises and culminates normally in a trial at the end of first 6 in respect of where you are effectively asked to do a full trial. It's a really useful process. Of course, it can be quite daunting when you're a pupil to undertake advocacy exercises in Chambers, but of course it is a very useful process, and I say that from experience because what you benefit from is having such a significant amount of feedback before you even get onto your feet in second 6. In addition to advocacy training, there are opportunities to go around the other centres as well. So, of course, we're spread over different locations, and there will be opportunities for you to meet co-pupils in other centres, and then also clerks in centres across the country as well. Each piece of written work that you do gets feedback on it, so you know what level you're at and what you need to do to improve. And finally, you also get opportunities such as marshalling. So part of your first 6, you're encouraged to undertake 1 or 2 marshalling opportunities to allow you to gain that exposure in court. In terms of supervisors, I think this largely depends pupil to pupil, but on average, each pupil will generally have about 3 to 4 supervisors, and they're split up into 4-month blocks. And that gives you a diversity in respect of the feedback that you'll receive, but also you're encouraged to do work for other members of Chambers as well, which gives you an insight into other people's practices and no doubt helpful feedback for yourself. Once you move into second 6, then of course you start to build your own practice and start to do your own court work. One of the questions that we had in online was, in second 6, do you take on your own cases? And the answer to that is yes. At 3PB, you have a practice in second 6, which will be focused upon the area in which your pupillage is in. I think that's everything. Is there anything else you could think of, David, in respect of training?
Well, I suppose we were going to talk, weren't we, about sort of some of our personal views on the benefits of pupillage at 3PB, because whilst both Jack and I came through pupillage here, both at a similar time, our roots and our experiences were quite different. And I think, Jack, you were going to sort of say from a more typical pupillage angle.
Yeah. So I had a relatively traditional route into the bar. I did my undergraduate degree in law, and then did a bar course, and then had a year in between the bar course and pupillage, working as a paralegal, and then commenced pupillage thereafter. My experience of pupillage was that I felt very well supported throughout it all. There are hard times during pupillage because, of course, it is a very difficult year in any way, because you are learning a lot, you are being assessed, and you are having to come to grips with concepts which you might not have about before, or indeed applied in practice. But it is, what I can say honestly is that, having been through it only sort of 18 months ago, that there is a very collegiate atmosphere here between both your co-pupils, senior members of chambers, the clerks and staff. Everybody is willing to support you and does want to ensure that you succeed. I started off doing a pupillage split between criminal work and personal injury, and that carried on throughout the majority of my pupillage. And now I do slightly different practice areas. I now practice in property and education work. What I can say is that during pupillage, I had exposure to lots of in-court advocacy, which really helped me in terms of cross-applying that into different practice areas. How about your personal experience?
So mine is a bit different, and I did a English literature degree initially, and then did the GDL over here in Bristol, and then was sort of on the fence about whether I go to the bar, whether I become a solicitor, and I think the deciding point for me was I got a training contract, so it was right. I'll get on the solicitor route. For me, I think what was quite different to a lot of people was I was very aware of what area I wanted to do from the very beginning. And even as a trainee solicitor, I was essentially recruited because there was a real business need for that area. And that area being children law. That is very advocacy heavy, whether you are a solicitor or a barrister. I practiced as a solicitor for around 5-6 years before essentially being poached to the bar from someone at 3PB. I was in a fortunate position because all advocates in court tend to know each other well. And so I had opportunities at various chambers in the Southwest to do a truncated pupillage. So I had a dispensation because of previous experience. So I was doing a 3-month first 6, 3 months second 6. I can truthfully say, and I'm sure it sounds like I'm just saying this, but I can truthfully say that 3PB was always where I was going to go. And no matter what the what was on the table for these other pupillage offers, 3PB was the very, very clear front runner. I was very aware as a solicitor the quality of the work that was around and the quality of the work that went to 3PB. And as you will find in your practice, I think in most areas, it very much is quality over quantity, because some areas, particularly legal aid children, in terms of what I do, quantity is not a problem, because sadly there is a great need out there. But in terms of the quality of the work, I knew that was going to 3PB. And of course, I was aware of the barristers that I instructed as a solicitor, and the vast majority that I wanted to instruct were at 3PB. So from that perspective, it was an obvious choice. When I started pupillage, I think I just had the one pupil supervisor because it was for a much shorter period of time. It was a very focused pupillage, and it was indeed the barrister who had poached me from being a solicitor. And I think he was sort of the view of, well, you know a lot about what you do, so what is it that you want to know? And I remember saying, well, as a solicitor, I was employed, and I'm going over to the bar where I'm self-employed. How on earth do you do that? I have no idea. And that is something that can seem very daunting to some people, and it's something that's worth getting your head around early on, because it is a huge difference if you've never been self-employed. And as I said, I was in my sort of early 30s, and having been employed all my life, it was a big change. And actually there was a lot that I found that even though I was doing sort of 95% of the same type of stuff I was doing as a solicitor, because it was so advocacy heavy, that I felt that, you know, it was almost like starting again in many ways. But actually the support I had here was massive. And it was wonderful in terms of the fact that I knew a lot of the family barristers here already. But there is this sense that even though everyone is too busy, no one's too busy to actually help. And that remains the case from when you're a pupil. I think when we were pupils, there's always the pupil WhatsApp group, and that was buzzing all the time in terms of people saying, we're being asked to do this, but what on earth do they mean? But also it translates then into practice very much so. In terms of family, we have, I think, 2 or 3 WhatsApp groups. I think there are now over 80 family barristers within 3PB across the centres. One is the family general one, then there's family, children, legal, in which it is constant, it is muted, but if I opened it now, I'm sure there'll be lots of things on there. And it is ranging from who's got the email address for this judge, or I'm against this person tomorrow, as they want to have any experience with him, to my client took a swing at me, I'm in a really bad way, has anyone got time for a coffee? And it really is like that. There's also the social sort of WhatsApp group as well. So I went from being a solicitor as part of a firm in which I had colleagues, and everyone said, aren't you going to be really lonely, when you go to the bar? And in terms of when you're all sat in an office, you can bounce ideas off each other. And the answer is I feel far more part of a collegiate group here, as Jack said, than I did then. I think that is a huge thing. And I know for a fact, having spoken to other barristers, but also people that I know that have moved chambers to here, and people that have joined chambers and other chambers when I joined here, are all very clear that that's not the case across the board. And I think that whilst you will all be very keen to know about what makes for a good application, what makes you stand out for pupillage, because that's obviously key. A lot of you may well be thinking, well, if I get a pupillage, wow, I've got it, but then I've got pupillage, it's almost that daunting step, and that there's a huge amount of support here, which is great, whilst there is alongside that still that expectation that you will stand on your own 2 feet, and that is a lot of the a lot of what you're being looked at as well. In terms of then, I did perhaps a bit less because I just had that less time in which to do it, and the sort of things that I had to go through according to the Bar Standards Board were slightly different as well. But I did some of the, I did the advocacy thing with you, which I'd rather not talk about, because it was doing a completely different area of law than I'd done for sort of the past 10 years, and it was terrifying. But we get through it, and I think that's the point about life at the bar, is you've always got to be ready for the unexpected. And then once I started my second 6, which was obviously only 3 months, it was in an area of law which is 99.9% advocacy based. And so I was very much in court, but I know that was the case for pupils across the board. And I had a very, very busy caseload from the outset. And that's as a result of being in a very, very good set and having great clerks who are also, it's another great reason for pupillage here, because the clerks are just brilliant. They tend to know more about our jobs than we do, and are who we sort of hugely rely upon. So I think, sort of from my perspective, having been through a lot of different training in firms and different areas, it's by far the most attentive training I've had, but also pushes you to stretch yourself as well. So from my perspective, I can thoroughly recommend it as a benefit of pupillage here.
So I echo what David says in that regard. I think what might be helpful now is to turn to some questions in which we've had already in online, and answer a few of those. I can see that there's a few coming in on the screen there, so we'll answer those as well. And of course, then we'll open it up to the floor to ask questions. And of course, those in person will also have the opportunity after the event to ask questions as well. We've had one question in online, which is, can you provide an insight into life at the bar on the Western Circuit? I think both David and I practice on the Western Circuit, and what I would say firstly is that it is a very collegiate circuit. Chambers encourages pupils to undertake the Western Circuit advocacy training, which takes place during your first 6, and that gives you an opportunity to meet your pupils on the circuit in different chambers. But it's a really nice circuit to practice on. It obviously differs on your practice area as to your exposure to your peers on circuit, dependent on what area of law you practice in and the amount of court work you do compared to paperwork. But I think it's a great circuit to practice on. And of course, it's not the only place that we practice, because at 3PB we are a national set of chambers, and so we practice on various circuits. But that question was directly related to the Western Circuit. Do you have anything to add on that?
Agree in terms of it being a friendly place to be. I can only speak to my area, but I think, as I was saying earlier, everyone knows everyone. It's always the same faces, which is quite nice, really. But as you said, going and doing those courses and stuff with people that are at a similar stage as you is a good idea, because you may well be rubbing shoulders with other people a lot in years to come.
Can I chip in on that? Yeah. Sorry. Yes, I should say I'm actually a member of the Chambers, not a law student. So I think that the importance of the circuit varies, though, doesn't it? Depending on what area of law you do. So I do civil law like Jack, and it's not quite the same. You don't. So, for example, in family, I think, David, you go to the same courts, don't you, all the time? I go where the work takes me. I think Jack goes where the work takes him. And whilst I'm more often in Bristol, I'm off to Cambridge to do a trial. I've been in Luton. So it varies depending on what sort of work you want to do.
Absolutely. I agree. And as I say, I can only speak from my area. You know, for me, it's sort of largely the West, which can be a bit all over, but because there aren't a ton of people that do that area of work, it's the same people coming up, and it's not as far traveled as others, but it's a good circuit to be on.
I think
we covered a few of these, I think.
Yes,
yeah, when
we have. Let's have a look. It says, does 3PB accommodate for prospective pupils who are not yet certain on a specific area of practice? And so our recruitment for 2027 is practice group driven on the business seat of Chambers. And so the application in which you make, of course, is for a particular pupillage within a particular group of chambers. But of course, over and above everything else, what we do prioritise in all applications is excellence, and mark, of course, everybody on the basis of those competencies that David outlined moments ago. Is there anything else in respect to that? I think that covers that one.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
And
so we've had a. I'm going to field this one because it's probably a very short answer. The question is, do we encourage those who are yet to undertake the BTC to apply now? And if so, will an unsuccessful application this year impact an application made the following year? The answer is yes, apply now. It's not too early to apply. And no, an unsuccessful application this year won't impact an application made the following year.
And if I can chip in on that, I'm also a member of Chambers, and I have sat on various recruitment interviews for pupillage. Absolutely not. If you have applied and failed, it's expected that you will try again following year. So no, there is absolutely no stigma attached to having failed first time round. We recognise there are brilliant candidates out there that we haven't taken on first time round because haven't been able to.
We covered a lot of that.
yes, I think we have in the course of our. I think it should, perhaps we have a look at the online questions and see what's
you cover in your bit about how it's competitive.
So again,
yeah, just something that I think is always important about pupillage at 3PB is that whilst particularly when we were doing it, there were multiple pupils, and I think that a lot of people coming into pupillage can worry about that competitive element. And at 3PB, that doesn't apply. The only person you're in competition with is yourself. At 3PB, the priority is excellence. And so if you have met the criteria that are set out from the Bar Standards Board's perspective, and then the separate 3PB one, that's what you're based on, not about it's not about pitting pupils against each other. And I certainly remember when we were doing pupillage, that was not only a bit of a relief, but it does mean that it takes the pressure off you getting on with your fellow pupils as well.
So look through what these ones are. So from the top, could you please advise on how to stand out on a pupillage application to 3PB? I think this is probably one of the most common questions that is asked, how to stand out in pupillage application process. And I think the straightforward answer is to be yourself in your application. There isn't something in which I could say is going to make you stand out, because if I know it, then people will inevitably have done it, and then multiple people would have done it. And so it will become something that doesn't stand out. But I think best approach, or the approach that really helped me in applying, is look at the competencies in which you are to meet. Look at what experiences you've had, whether those be legal or not, and see how they link up and connect them to what Chambers is looking for. But what I think is really important is that you get through on your application form yourself and who you are as a person as well. Anything to add to that?
I agree. I think it was that point that I outlined over the application process in terms of not vague, generic buzzwords. It is about your real life experiences, and as Jack says, it's about being yourself. It's about PPB should be fighting for you and not just the other way around. So it is about explaining why you are the candidate. But if you're putting that vague stuff down that doesn't really apply to you, that's going to come out very quickly in interviews for when you go through that process.
I think also having an insight into the set that you're applying for. Obviously, everyone does multiple applications, but for example, attending this open evening tonight or understanding what structure the pupillage takes at 3PB as well is helpful to indicate your interest in 3PB. Chris?
I'm going to say, bear in mind who your audience is a bunch of people who do advocacy for a living. Sell yourself to them. Try and be analytical and hit the targets they want you to hit, because that's the sort of thing that they're used to looking at. And that's what they want to see from you, because that's what you'll be doing for a job if you're successful. So do that, sell yourself.
It comes to the point of effectively treating your application form as a piece of written advocacy.
Yeah,
effectively.
The process is actually very fair. When it comes to it, you will be justifying why it is you've chosen a piece of work in your second round of interview. And your piece of work could be a piece of verse or poetry. It doesn't have to be legal, but you have to explain why it is you've chosen it and what it shows about you. That is your advocacy. But I just want to add another couple of things. Don't humble brag. Don't say your biggest fault is your perfectionism.
No, you have not a fault.
Be realistic about what it is you write about yourself. And also, although quite rightly it's been pointed out that many pupillages are a good thing because they're there to tell you the area of law that's going to float your boat or not. Don't have 30-minute pupillages. Much prefer to see, when I look at an application form, and that's the biggest challenge you've got to get through the sift before you even get your face before a panel. When I look at the form, I want to see experience that's been much more directed at helping other people. Citizens advice work, Law Society work that goes out to the community and helps them. Yes, you will need to put down some mini pupillages, and you'll need to know and remember what learning you got from those mini pupillages, because you'll be asked that in the application form. What did you get from it? So be careful and don't copy and paste. because that will make your application form not specific. Deal specifically with the application you're applying for. And that's very important for 3PB because they are target pupillages that you're aiming for. You may be a generalist, and at the end of the day, we should all be generalists because we should all be aspiring to be judges, and judges don't, except in various specialist areas, the judges lower down the courts don't restrict you to areas. So you could be capable of being a generalist, but you're applying for a specific pupillage, and that's the one you should be directing your application for.
And just to add on to that, and hopefully this might be obvious, be very wary of ChatGPT or anything like that, because we know it's an incredible resource, but the more people are using it, the more obvious it is. Certainly from my perspective, I am in course a lot with litigants in person, and judges, we all now know when something's been written by ChatGPT. In fact, earlier this week, there was a trial in which an independent social worker had to admit on the stand that 80% of his report was written by ChatGPT because people are just recognising it pretty easily. So just be careful.
And if
with AI tools.
Falls at the first hurdle because
Absolutely.
you're going for interview, you are not going in as a bot. You're going in as you. So if you haven't been the author of your words, if they haven't come from your mouth, it'll be so obvious when it comes to questioning you on it at interview.
Yes. Moving on, I've got a question here. For criminal pupillage, do pupils get the opportunity for both defence and prosecution, or is there a certain area of focus? The answer is yes. Pupils do get the opportunity of both defence and prosecution work. In the first couple of years of tenancy, are the earnings commensurate with the pupillage award? Is there a significant difference in either direction?
Yes, it probably depends on your practice area.
Absolutely.
I'm sure that's got to be right, and I can only speak from my area. But again, you're going to be recruited as a tenant. You're going to be offered tenancy if you excel, and if you excel, then that's not going to be a problem, one would assume. And it's a good set in which good quality work comes in and very good clerking.
You should be exceeding your pupillage award if you're doing the right things.
And that's coming from someone who does legal aid largely. So don't fear.
Bear in mind there is a difference between earnings and receipts, which chambers have no control over whatsoever.
And again, it is that type of thing in terms of life as what's life like in practice, that it's worth getting your head around before you join.
David, this is probably one for you. Hi, because you did a reduced pupillage, do you still have to complete the tenancy period, or were you automatically exempt tenancy? And then following on, hi, for the reduced pupillage, did you have to apply to chambers on the gateway or directly to chambers, and did you apply outside pupillage cycle timings, or was it at any time throughout the year?
It's a bit messy, and it depends which route you go down. So for transferring solicitors, you can do your higher rights of advocacy, which I think in some cases means that you're exempted from all pupillage requirements and all of that type of thing, and you can essentially be offered tenancy and off you go. For me, I did the elements of the BTC and then applied to the Bar Standards Board, and they give you a sort of dispensation. Short answer, no, I didn't need to go through Gateway, which is why all questions about that should be directed to Jack. But there was a timing process, and there were still elements. It's very much bespoke, I think, for oral advocacy. It's a key skill for transferring solicitors. And I know other people have transferred who've had different to me, but there were still elements that said these elements essentially of the BTC. And in terms of the pupillage itself, you still need to do things like the pupils advocacy course, which are run by INS. So no straight answer is what's a bit frustrating. That probably brings me on to, I'm sure I saw one of the written questions that we've had previously is about choosing INS as well. And I think that everyone has a different view on this. I think a lot of people do painstaking research into the INS. and I'm embarrassed to say that I didn't. The barrister who I was sort of treating very much as a mentor when I was coming across and who turned out to be my pupil supervisor, I asked him which one he was a member of and why, liked his answer and joined that one. But I think it's different for many others.
I think it comes.
I just it seemed to be the question maybe was a bit confused as to what tenancy meant. So I just thought I'd say tenancy is membership of chambers.
Yeah.
And once you're in chambers, that's it. Everyone is treated as an equal. So tenancy is what you're aiming for. It's not like a temporary position or something. We're all tenants.
Yeah, so I think that's right, because I think the question was worded in a way, what was I exempted from tenancy? If I'd been exempted from tenancy, I would have been very upset.
Yeah.
Tenancy is very much what we're looking for, but
Yes.
pupillage, I had a reduced pupillage. I wasn't exempt from it.
It largely comes down to your personal circumstances and the extent of which waivers are granted by the BSB for individual circumstances. But as Chris said, pupillage and tenancy are distinct in that regard. What kind of work do pupils as part of the public law and education pupillage in London do? A wide mix, I would say. If you are referring to second six work, I think that could vary from first tier tribunal hearings in respect to special educational needs tribunal hearings to disability discrimination claims as well, and judicial review work in respect of local government and education duties upon local authorities, etc. I know that we have Lachlan Wilson in the room, who is a renowned education practitioner, who also might be able to give some insight into that second six level education and public law work.
Yeah, well, actually, let me start off with the first six, actually, because in the first six, if that's the pupillage that you have taken on, you will be expected to assist with drafting work, especially drafting discrimination claims before the first tier tribunal, special education needs and disability tribunal. You will be expected to do drafting on judicial review applications and responding to judicial review applications. A little bit like the criminal side of practice, you will do claimant and respondent work. You won't just do claimant work or respondent work. So you'll get exposed to the drafting, and Jack's absolutely right. You'll get quite a lot of first tier tribunal work, university work, higher education, further education work, particularly challenging mainly disability discrimination, but also challenging the quality of the provision that may or may not have been provided. But a full panoply of the education system.
Question here in respect of selection if you don't have a first class degree. So it's on the website that you're unlikely to be selected for interview unless you have your first degree, and then some commentary on changing careers after 20 years in the NHS. I have an undergraduate degree, but I've studied to honours and master's levels throughout my career. I think what's to say is, of course, when the website's referring to a first class degree, it's referring to, of course, the competition that is around in respect of individuals having a first class degree or a 2-1 degree or the like. But I would not say that it would mean that you wouldn't get through the paper sift if you don't have a first class degree, of course, because as you can see that in the example or the question that we've been given, there are a number of other academic achievements in which have been achieved which can demonstrate academic ability. And I think that's the importance, in that the criteria marks you on your academic ability. And so provided that you can evidence that, then the marking scheme will allow for that to be accounted for. It's not just a first or nothing at all sort of system. It really does accommodate for different successes in terms of academic achievement. One question that we did have is, how do you apply if you have internationally recognised qualifications, or you did your qualifications in a different country, and how do they cross over? I think the best way that you can get across in your application form is to explain to us how the qualifications cross over and what level they are equivalent to in the UK. I'm not sure if anyone else has any input in respect of the first class degree or academic.
Could I just quickly come in, because on a paper sift, if you've got a 2-2 or below, you'll be expected to provide some extenuating circumstances for it. And there may be, and your extenuating circumstances, maybe you didn't apply yourself in that, but then you did do this fantastic LLM. And by the way, that's a separate LLM. That's not an LLM that's assigned to a bar school LLM. And look at what you got. You got distinguished in that. That could be your extenuating circumstances. Equally, it could be for other reasons. But yes, 2-1 or first is expected. As a matter of course, unless there are reasons why it isn't there, we are not a chambers that ignores anyone who got a 2-1 and only go for first. We are not that chambers. There are some out there, but we are not that chambers because we recognise academic ability can be shown in other ways.
I think that's the important part to remember, is it's the applications don't go into a computer and that then just looks at the numbers and says, well, computer says no. It is exactly that, and it's about that criteria we went through. It doesn't merely focus on academia, and I think that Ian and the other members of chambers will have worked with many people in which the academia is off the charts. Can they do the job? Barely. It's not all about that, and you've got to remember the applications are being marked by people, machines.
Does 3PB accept direct applications outside the Pupillage gateway, and type of application does 3PB specifically prefer for interview? Well, I think the simple answer to that is that the 12-month Pupillages are recruited through the gateway, and if you are an established practitioner, then of course there's a different route in terms of applying for tenancy, but the 12-month Pupillages are through the gateway. I think we've answered.
We will come to those in here as well, by the way.
Yeah. How do you expect an applicant to address location if they are applying for pupillage at a centre outside of their local area? Well, I suppose that the 2027 pupillages are in specific areas. And of course, that is where your pupillage will take place in respect to the centre, and then you'll be practising around and then further beyond that centre. I don't think necessarily that location specifically is something to address in the application form, save for that you may want to reference the location so far as Y3PB. It's not something that
I would anticipate it's probably something that's more likely to come up in interview, because if you are living in Glasgow and you're applying in Bristol, I imagine that's going to come up in terms of, well, why Bristol and what your plans are with that. That's for pupillage, because of course tenancy, as we were talking about earlier, you will go all over the place.
Just seeing that we're at 5:45, so I'm just going to ones that perhaps we haven't answered more generally. In relation to education work 3PB, do you mostly represent the local authority, or is it a mixture of appellant and LA? And the answer is it's a mixture, a wide mixture of not just appellant and LA in the sense of, for example, first-year tribunal cases, but also universities, higher education institutions, students, schools, so the wide range of institutions and individuals in the education sector. What is the difference between earnings and receipts? I think this was mentioned moments ago. Of course, perhaps if we separate them out into billings and receipts, billings are what you bill for your work, receipts is what you actually receive into your bank account post. Of course, if and when you become a tenant, post your rent deduction, and
so it's when you bill and when your solicitors pay you. Mm-hmm. There could be a large gap between those two.
Probably spent a good 10-15 minutes on the online
just, I think one important one, that if there are mitigating circumstances an applicant has been through, how best would you advise that they inform and explain these and the effects of chambers when applying? And the answer to that is, of course, mention it in your application form. I think there is a specific box on the gateway for those circumstances. Going to the end of this list before we move on to the room. An issue in terms of just that final question there, and of course, if people don't have their questions answered online, then they can of course write in and ask them. But with regard to the application being anonymised to prevent identifying risk characteristics, is there a specific way an applicant should regard a mini pupillage they have experienced with 3PB without that becoming an issue in terms of an applicant becoming identifiable? Insofar as the mini pupillage, of course, you'd specify where your mini pupillage is. To a certain extent, the way in which your application is anonymised, it takes out from my memory your name, your address, and I think that's it. And so, insofar as the individual contents of your answers are concerned, the gateway won't anonymise that section.
Yeah, I think it takes out certainly school as well, because if you went to such and such girls' school, you clearly are not male these days. But you should identify, if you did a mini pupil at 3PB, you're expected to put 3PB down, that you did a mini pupil, but you are expected to say what the learning was. That is not specifically identifying you, because so many people do mini pupillages at 3PB.
Remember 45 to 50 per year.
Okay, I think we will now turn to questions from people in the room. And then if we have a couple of minutes at the end, we can go back to the online.
Yep. Start from the back and work forward.
Yeah. Katie, thank you for doing this evening. I wanted to ask, if you apply for a specific pupillage, for example, the education one, and it's in a place that you don't want your entire career to be, but you're happy to do the pupillage there, are you then able to complete that there and then move to the a different office, be based at a different office, or are you then rooted at that specific place?
I think correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that the pupillages offer currently are where that in terms of where there's a business need in chambers in those centres. I think I was saying earlier, from my perspective, I'm based in Bristol, but I'm clerked out of all of the centres. They're all very much linked. So we have a Bournemouth centre, which in terms of time in the car is probably closer for me. And I'm clerked out of Bournemouth as much as I am Bristol, and also Manchester and Oxford a lot as well. So I think that, generally speaking, if, for example, you apply to Bristol for the family pupillage, you'll be expected to be based at the Bristol centre. And then how much time you spend in the Bristol centre, if you get tenancy, is then a matter of where your work takes you.
Thank you.
Anything to add on?
Yeah, I think that covers that. Yeah.
Hi, I know you've already touched on mitigating circumstances for grades and things like that, but are candidates with disabilities or learning differences are supported in any way differently through the application process and through pupillage itself? Is there any specific structure of support that can be offered?
I think that the answer is yes, very much so.
Yes.
I mean, in terms of the application process, I can't speak to that. But in terms of pupillage, yeah, very much so. I think that 3PB go beyond the reasonable adjustments in terms of what can be done, in my experience. In terms of application interview process, I don't know.
Indeed.
The application process does have an ability for you to say whether you suffer from a disability, as you might expect, because when it comes to inviting you for interview, it may be that there will be reasonable adjustments you need to have put in place in order to attend that interview. So absolutely. The answer is, are you covered when you become a member of chamber? Well, yes, of course you are, and you are supported. Yes, a number of people in chambers who suffer from various learning difficulties, particularly the specific learning difficulty of dyslexia. Yeah.
Great. Any more from the room?
Hi,
Working forward.
sorry.
No, that's fine. No, you are next.
Apologies. Okay. Thank you for taking the time, and I think you've covered almost all. I know you mentioned at the start which specific pupillages you were offering. Do you mind just recapping on those? I didn't catch them all.
So he was family. I can
Family.
say that.
So yes, make sure we get this right. So London is education and public law, Bristol is family, Oxford is property, and Winchester's crime.
And they are the only ones within this application cycle.
Yeah.
Just thinking aloud, in terms of kind of the construction and engineering side, do you have any sight of when there would be, I guess, that business need, or is that something you wouldn't be able to predict for upcoming pupillage cycles?
Yes, it's not something we can predict for upcoming. I think the answer is that in 2028 there will be an assessment of what villages are offer at that time, and so I'd simply advise you just to keep an eye out on 2028 in the future years.
Thank you.
How did you both find, I suppose still ongoing because you're both quite new to Chambers, but how did you both find the transition from your pupillage to establishing your practice as a brand? Like, did you find that was supported well? You know, because I suppose that's the most unique thing about being a barrister.
Yeah, of course. I think that it was very well supported. It's not as if you finish pupillages and you're a tenant and then there you go, you're on your own sort of thing. There is a continuing professional development system within Chambers that you have with the clerks. You build a very close relationship with the clerks in which clerk your practice area, which in turn then develops you in respect of not just the work that you're undertaking, but also the way in which you market yourself. So, for example, your website profile or the events that you attend or the seminars that you may deliver. And so, just for example, in my personal experience of that, I've had continuing meetings with the clerks throughout my period of tenancy, which is just over a year now, in respect of the trajectory and how things are going moving forward. And I find that I'm very well supported in terms of balance as to the level of work as well, because of course work can become complicated, or indeed you can start to receive much more senior work very quickly, and particularly when you start to specialize in a particular area, and it's about understanding where you are at in your practice, and the clerks help with that. And so I would say as a bottom line, ultimately there's a lot of support there.
I think for me again, slightly different. I came over to the bar almost taking work with me in a way, because in the area in which I work, a lot of it is through the contacts that you know and who you've been in court with, and so I think that a lot of the solicitors that I worked with as a solicitor were all ready to sort of pass me work straight away, because they knew that hopefully I was a safe pair of hands, and so I didn't really find any difference going from the end of that second period to the tenancy. For some cases, I was being instructed on literal past clients who I'd left behind at my firm. In terms of growing your brand and that type of thing, again, from 3PB's perspective, there's a whole area that we have dedicated to marketing, and people that are extremely clued up on that area, and that will talk our ears off about our branding, and we're doing not enough, which is generally the case, and they're always there if we need to pick up and say, actually, should I be doing a bit more of this in terms of writing articles, doing a bit of training? What events should I be doing? Should I be doing more or less social media? You name it.
Can I just pick up on the word branding? Branding is quite a corporate concept, and we are an unincorporated association as Chambers. Your brand, the most important aspect of your brand is your name, your professional name. You are self-employed. It's your name that is your reputation. That goes forward. In the early days, you don't have that brand because you haven't established that reputation if you're going through the traditional route, unlike David's route. So your brand is you're a member of the education team at 3PB. And quite right, the marketing team at 3PB have been pointed out. They are very good at pushing that brand that you become part of. But ultimately, let's remember what the most important brand is, your name. You develop that through having the support and the assistance of, a good marketing team, excellent clerks who will point you in the right direction of developing your practice or carry out practice development meetings with you, as often as you like, actually, but certainly every year. And that's when you begin to establish your name in your expertise. And always, don't forget, you are then become by that stage a member of Chambers, always knowing you can take your brand elsewhere. Well, it is hoped that the support that you have and have been given and the loyalty that you have, you will retain your brand within the bosom of the Chambers that you have been a member of for so many years. But ultimately, your brand is your name.
I think that's a really good point in the sense that if a barrister moves chambers to a different set of chambers, solicitors are not going to be like, well, I only want to instruct from 3PB. It doesn't really matter to them. It's, well, the barrister's gone there, so I'm still going to instruct them because I want to instruct that barrister. So it's right, your brand is you. We are just very fortunate that our brand is amplified from the outset because we're part of a good set of chambers.
And I would say that the issue is not normally that we're not getting enough marketing. The issue is that marketing is not getting enough of us.
Absolutely.
Chase us around to do more marketing rather than the other way around. If you have the drive and determination to push yourself forward, you will have the resources. James would be delighted that you do.
I hope we had a question.
Sorry, I was just going to ask, with regards to the applications being anonymised, you mentioned that the school would be. Is universities, because I know some chambers anonymise the university you've gone to, but some keep the name in there. So how do you go about that?
I don't know.
Yes, I think it used to be the case that the university was anonymised completely, although I'm not entirely sure if that's still the case. I'm not sure if anybody else has an insight into that. But it's certainly something that we can follow up on.
Brains trust surveilled.
It is something. My recollection is, and I sat on the SIFT 2 years ago, so I didn't sit on last year's SIFT, but my recollection is the university is anonymous, so you don't know whether you're coming from Oxbridge or whatever. We don't know that. So yeah, there is, and the point about that is to just mitigate against unconscious or even conscious bias, to mitigate against that. But every member who sits on the SIFT and every member of Chambers actually undertakes training in avoiding all the biases that you can imagine do operate when looking at an application.
Tony, maybe one more if there's any.
I think this would be more aimed at Jack. Essentially, I know that you had a year out, but I suppose generally, how would you describe the step from taking the bar course to obtaining pupillage and kind of the best way to prepare for that so that you're not overwhelmed, I suppose?
I think the first thing is if you have a break between the bar course and pupillage is to take a break and enjoy the break. In terms of preparing for sort of first six, what I did was sort of read up on the fundamentals of the areas of law in which I was doing in first six. And of course I was working as a paralegal, which meant I was getting some practical exposure as well. The way in which the first six training program is structured and the feedback in which you get is structured allows you to come in and develop as you go through. Of course, there is a difference between the bar course and pupillage, and you will be taught in pupillage things that perhaps you were taught or not taught on the bar course, or taught to do things in different ways in which you were taught to do them on the bar course. And this is a very individual profession ultimately. But I found the transition to be supported by the fact that I had some practical experience coming in, but also when I got in, it was supported. I think that's it in respect of the online session. I think what we'll do is we'll close that down now. Just to thank everybody who attended online for coming. We hope that you found this helpful. If any of you have any questions after today, then you can get in contact with us at pupillage@3pb.co.uk and we will answer them there. Thank you again for attending and good night.